My name is John Molinaro. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. You can find me on Twitter at John Molinaro, all one word, or the website that I run, which is tfcrepublic.ca. And I also work for Sportsnet, which is one of Canada's leading all sports networks. So my writing appears on their website as well.
Cool. All right.
I also do stuff for World Soccer Magazine in the UK as well, and also do television and radio work for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation here in Canada as well.
Dope. All right. So let's kick it off this way. How do you feel like this World Cup is being covered by Canadian media specifically? Is there criticism, anticipation, all of the above?
There's a lot of anticipation. This is the first time that the men's tournament is coming to Canadian soil. And even though it's only about whatever it is, 12 or 15 games, it's still a massive deal. I mean, the biggest sporting event on the planet is going to be played on, Canadian soil. So it's a big deal. And I think the fact that Canada has a strong team and the expectation is that it will do well compared to 4 years ago in Qatar, I think that is only leading to more sort of a buzz within the country, especially as we get closer. I mean, we're less than 2 months, roughly 2 months from the start of from Canada's opening game on June 12th. So I think as we inch closer, the buzz and the anticipation is going to just continue to build.
If I could ask you to split maybe the kind of journalist expectation, which normally tends to be, in my experience anyway, quite pessimistic, and maybe contrast that with the public anticipation that you feel. What is the Canadian public? I'm sure it takes the same kind of color, yeah?
Yeah, I think expectations are pretty universal around both whether it's media or whether it's hardcore soccer fans or just general sports fans. I think the expectation is that Canada will and should, at the very least, get out of the group. When you look at their previous two World Cup appearances, both in 1986 and 2022, they lost all three games. And, last time around in Qatar was particularly disappointing because, Canada was eliminated after the first two games. They scored a goal, which they didn't do in 1986. So I suppose progress was made in that sense. But I think the feeling was that it was such a young, vibrant team. And, Canada had never had that many players playing their trade at top European clubs before that this was going to be something meaningful, that Qatar was going to be kind of like a statement tournament for the Canadians. And in some ways it was just getting there. And the fact that they were, they were the best team through the CONCACAF qualifying process, which is just a grueling marathon. I think it said a lot about them. But they didn't win a game and they bowed out rather unceremoniously. So I think that led to a lot of disappointment. I think the expectation amongst fans and media this time is that they have to go one better, especially here on home soil, that simply being there isn't good enough. And, I think expectations have been raised with the hiring of Jesse Marsh, all those players that I mentioned before who are playing at top European clubs, whether it's Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David or Taniel Uche or Kyle Larin, Stefan Eustachio. They're all still playing at top European clubs, but they're just 4 years on. So they have even more experience now. So I think the expectation is quite rightly that, Canada should get out of the World Cup and get to a knockout game.
If I were to ask you to then kind of big picture, maybe diagnose the state of Canadian football, is it in a healthy place? Is it trending upwards or is it trending downwards?
No, I think it's trending upwards, definitely. I mean, when you think about there's now more Canadians playing at top European clubs than ever before, and teams like Bayern Munich and Juventus and Villarreal, that would have been really unfathomable to think, 20 years ago, when often Canada, fielded players who were, unattached to clubs, believe it or not. And now you've got more players playing at the very high top level of MLS. So I think that combined with the fact that, you have the Canadian Premier League, our own domestic league, which is now in its 8th year, the fact that you have, more talented players coming through the national team process or pool. Jesse Marsh has done a pretty good job of, I would suggest, of expanding the player pool by getting dual nationals to commit to Canada, whether it's Alfie Jones or Marcelo Flores or Luc de Fougerolles. I think, and the interest in the game is at an all-time high as well, just from a media and fan perspective. Certainly that's been helped by the World Cup coming here, but I think just in general, there's more sort of eyeballs on the game of soccer in this country than ever before. So all in all, and I haven't even talked about the women's side of the game, which is growing exponentially here in Canada as well. We talk about the launch of the Northern Super League last year, and just the women really doing well, whether it's in the NSL or in the NSWSL or Europe top European leagues. But overall, I think there's no question that soccer in Canada is on the up, on the trending side of things.
One of the things I wonder about as somebody who was born in Halifax is, where do the players come from? So are they mostly Toronto and parts surrounding? Like where? Because when I think about basketball and I think about hockey, the players come from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Basketball, the players are very Ontario centric, it seems. Where do the footballers come from?
Yeah, so it's weird because I mean historically it's been sort of southern Ontario where Toronto is, and then British Columbia as well. Those kind of have been the two. I don't know how to put it. Sort of hotspots, I guess, for development in terms of the Canadian national team, particularly likely in and around Toronto. When you think of places like Brampton and Scarborough, so many of the current members of the national team are from that sort of one very small geographic area. But it seems lately we've been sort of, BC hasn't had as much influence, and now you're seeing more and more players emerging from Quebec, whether it's someone like Ishmael Kone or Matthew Chouanier, Montreal in specific. And so Montreal has become sort of this new hotbed of development for Canadian soccer. And then there are other pockets as well. You think of someone like Jacob Schaffelberg, who comes from a small town in Nova Scotia. I think it's there are other sort of places that are popping up in terms of player development areas. But I think right now the major sort of two geographic hot spots for Canada are Southern Ontario and Quebec, specifically Montreal.
Cool. All right. So as we know, the hosts don't need to qualify. So what were Canada up to in the meantime with international invitations to competitions and friendlies? How have they been trending in this time where everybody else is kind of scrambling to get in?
Yeah, they've done a pretty good job of arranging, some pretty high-profile friendlies against a variety of opponents. When I think of last September, when they played Romania and Wales in Europe, and they won both of those games, and it was the first time they'd won back-to-back games on European soil in something ridiculous like 15 or 20 years. October they came home and they played. Who did they play? They played Australia and Ecuador, who are both going to the World Cup. November they were playing Colombia and Venezuela. They had another friendly against Guatemala in January. This most recent window, they played Tunisia, who is going to be at the World Cup, and they played Iceland. And then in June, their final two games are going to be Uzbekistan, who's qualified for the World Cup, and the Republic of Ireland, who lost a heartbreaker in the most recent European playoffs. So they've played a wide variety of teams, from different areas of the world, but different styles too. And I think that's I think that was on purpose. I mean, Jesse Marsh wants to sort of acclimatize his team in terms of what to expect come the World Cup, when they're going to have to play, well, we know they're going to play, Bosnia and and Switzerland, but they're also going to play Qatar. And then if they get beyond that, they might have to play a team from Asia or a team from South America. So I think that was very strategic in terms of the selection of opponents that they had, over the course of the last, year and a half.
How I don't even know though, because I didn't formulate this question until just now. But is there a slight disappointment in perhaps the Canadian footballing community that Italy did not qualify, considering maybe some of the diaspora that exists?
Yes and no. I think certainly there's disappointment because had they played Italy in the opening game in Toronto at BMO Field on June 12th, that would have been a marquee game, like to say the least, right? To play the first time that the Canadian men's team plays a World Cup on home soil, and is against Italy, the four-time World Cup champions, two-time European winners, one of the greatest footballing nations in the world. That would have been a great occasion, right? And you want to test yourself against the best teams in the world. I mean, playing up against a team the caliber and with the history of Italy would have been such a huge advertisement, not only for the World Cup, for Canadian football, and I think would have attracted an even bigger audience than the game would have attracted now that they face Bosnia. So in that sense, I think it's a missed opportunity. At the same time, I don't think there's any question that their chances of advancing to the group stage exponentially improve. That now that they're facing Bosnia, and that's no disrespect to Bosnia because they're a quality side with a lot of top players. But Italy is Italy, and they would have been they're ranked, I think, number 12 in the world right now. There is a massive population in Toronto, Italian population in Toronto, and I think this would have been a home game essentially for
Yeah.
them. So it would have made life really difficult for the Canadians had they had to have faced Italy. So I think there is some sort of relief that it ended up being Bosnia, because it does lead to less complicated paths to the knockout stage of the competition.
So let's get to Jesse Marsh. Like, what's the general consensus? Are fans happy with Jesse Marsh and his style of play? Are there questions there? And what should we expect? What should we expect to see in terms of, like, is this going to be a fun team to watch, or is it going to be kind of turgid and dull?
They're really happy with Jesse Marsh. I think he's come in a very short period of time and really put his stamp on the team. When you look at his predecessor, John Herdman, Canada really only played one way, and that was just to go full barrel forward without, and damn the consequences at the back. I think Jesse has sort of that same mentality. He wants to see his team play aggressively and be on the front foot. But I think he also understands that you can't afford to play like that all the time, and you have to sort of have a plan B and be a little bit more conservative at times. And I think that's borne out in the results, because they've been very successful under him. When you think about the team's fourth place showing at the Copa America in 2024, and just some of the recent results it's achieved in some international friendlies. So I think there's genuine appreciation for what Jesse Marsh has done. I think this is going to be an interesting team to watch, a fun team to watch, when you think of players the caliber of Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies and Tejon Buchanan and Richie Larea. I mean, it's a dynamic attacking team when it wants to be. And so I don't think they're going to be afraid to go toe-to-toe with teams and really sort of try to put opponents on the back foot. So I think, as I said, it'll be an entertaining team to watch this summer.
Part of the crappy part about FIFA expanding this thing to 48 teams is that I would have loved to do this interview a month from now, where we're going to see, is Alphonso Davies actually even fit to play World Cup matches? Mm-hmm. So this is my time to just throw proper nouns at you. Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, the names you've mentioned, those are standout names. What form would you say that those guys are in? And you can include anyone else that you like. And then maybe who else from the supporting cast that maybe people don't know that much about do you think are also in a good moment and primed to play well?
Well, I think Jonathan David he's had a difficult season at Juventus, right? I mean, he's coming from Lille in Ligue 1, where he was a very good goal scorer and one of the top, attacking players in France. I think he's found the going much tougher in Serie A, where they put a little bit more emphasis on defending and where the quality of defending is better. That's not to say it's a defensive league, just that they sort of put a higher emphasis on the art of defending in Italy, and he's had a hard time adjusting. And so he's probably hasn't been in the best form at club level. And so that's going to be one of the more interesting storylines to watch this summer, is whether he can sort of get back to where he was before the move to Juventus. Alphonso Davies is an interesting one, because obviously he's dealt with a lot of injuries over the last, whatever it is, year and a half. I think he's going to be healthy, and I think he'll be ready to go for the World Cup. But if he wasn't, if for some unfortunate reason he were to miss the World Cup, I don't necessarily think that hurts Canada all that much, because they've pretty much played without him for most of the last 2 years, and they've been able to grind out results. Even when you look back at 2022 during the qualifiers, he missed a lot of those games as well, and they still were the best team in CONCACAF during the CONCACAF qualification process, which was a gruel. So, are they a better team, and would you much rather have Alphonso Davies in your lineup? Absolutely, there's no question. But I don't think it's necessarily the death blow that a lot of people seem to think it is if you weren't be able to play, because they've shown that they can play without him and they can adapt without him. I think there are far more important players on this team than Alphonso Davies. And, one person we haven't talked about is Moise Mbito. that to me, like Alfonso Davies, he's been carrying injuries over the last, I think, 6 months. Hasn't really fully come back, and is still working his way back to fitness. And there's some question as to whether he can, be back to full fitness. If somehow they lose him, their number one center back, then that is a far more pressing issue for Canada to deal with than, say, Alfonso Davies not getting the World Cup. I think Moise Bambito is absolutely crucial to Canada's success because I think he's a quality center back who has very good recovery speed, a high footballing IQ, can sort of read the game, has excellent positioning, and just is a defensive quarterback, for lack of a better word. So that's one of the more sort of interesting players, and I would suggest probably one of Canada's more important players for this World Cup.
Cool. All right. I think I got a few more. What would you say are Canada's floor and ceiling? How bad do you think they can be, and how good do you think they can be? And then attached to that, what pressure do you think there is to be successful? However, success would be defined.
I mean, look, the floor and the ceiling. I mean, it could be anywhere as like finishing fourth in the group, and it could be anywhere as finishing, first place in the group. I mean, I really think it's wide open with Bosnia there now, and like I think, if this team was completely healthy, and then I'd give Canada a much bigger chance of taking of suggesting that they were a lock for one of those top two spots in their group. But the fact that they've had so many injuries at the back, especially when you think Alfonso Davies has been out, Moise Bambito has been out, Derek Cornelius has been out, Alistair Johnston has been out. They've all missed significant time on top of guys like Luc Defougerol and Alfie Jones. Those are like six of your starting defenders. So how can you not be concerned about that? And then you throw in the fact that Jonathan David hasn't been necessarily at his best with Juventus this year. And Kyle Larin, who, ranks second in all-time scoring behind Jonathan David, he hasn't scored in his last, I think, 12 or 13 games for Canada. So I think there's legitimate concern about how this team is going to sort of compete and how well it will do. I think they have the talent. If everything being equal, they have the talent to finish, first or second. But I think it's going to be a tough group. I mean, Bosnia is not an easy game. And then Switzerland, the third game in Vancouver, is a tough ask as well. So it makes that middle game against Qatar absolutely a vital must win. So, I could easily see them finishing fourth, could easily see them finishing first or second. If you were to pin me down right now, I would say I could probably see them finishing third in the group and then maybe getting through as one of the third place teams, but that'll depend. And then, in terms of, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Just how is success? What is success, and how is success defined?
Yeah, I think success is defined as getting out of the group, right? They have to sort of get to the knockout round. If they can win that knockout round and then go on to the round of 16, then that would be, an amazing accomplishment. But I think the bare minimum in terms of expectations and how success is defined is getting out of the group, actually winning a game at the World Cup, and getting to the knockout round of the World Cup for the first time in their history.
Insofar as you pay attention to the U.S. men's national team and the Mexican men's national team, do you think Canada is the better of the three?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think when you look at everything that's going on with the U.S., everything that's going on with Mexico, they seem to be teams in flux, in sort of transitions. And I think Canada is just more stable right now, even with all the injuries. I think, there's a firm coach in charge. There's a clear tactical identity. There's a clear sort of idea of what they want to do. And I don't necessarily see that with the U.S. and Mexico. So, that being said, those are still quality sides, the U.S. and Mexico, and they do seem to sort of step up when the pressure is on, especially in big tournaments like this. So, I wouldn't necessarily rule out Mexico or the U.S. from, making a run at this competition.
Who are your maybe top three, some favorites to win the competition?
Oh, I'm big on Spain. I've always admired Spanish football and just the way that they play the game. They're so disciplined and yet so dynamic in the way that they, just push the ball around and make, teams chase the game. So I think they would have to be considered a favorite. This is going to be Lionel Messi's, I would think, his last World Cup. They're the defending World Cup champions. Still a lot of quality in that team. So I think they would have to be considered, among the favorites. And then, you look at someone like Germany as well, who even with the, international retirement of Thomas Muller, just have a lot of depth, at the attacking position. And so they always seem to be in the mix too, as well. So I would think for me, those are the top three, but I really like Spain. I think they can go really well in this tournament. France too. I mean, it's another team with a lot of depth.
I'll mark you down as a Spain, though, John. It
Oh,
feels like a
definitely.
Spain.
Yeah. You put me down as Spain. That to me is probably, who I'm rooting for, just because I have so much respect for Spanish football.
Cool. All right. Last question. Is there anything I haven't asked about Canadian football that you feel is interesting that people might want to know or should know? Or have we covered everything?
No, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, to be honest.
All right, cool. John, where can people follow you again?
At tfcrepublic.ca, at Sportsnet website, which is sportsnet.ca, and then just my name, John Molinaro, all one word, on Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called now.
John, I thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it, man.
Sure, no problem.
So hi, my name is Kai. I'm Bulgarian, and I currently work both in football and in news. I cover Bulgarian and defense politics for the European Correspondent, but I also have my own football page going, which I think Dan is going to show somewhere on the screen. I've been doing this for now 5-6 years. I regularly write columns for Football España, which is an English-speaking website about Spanish football.
Cool. So we're obviously discussing Bosnia here. What's your link? What's your connection to Bosnia, and how do you know about the national team so much?
Bosnia, I've had a lot of Bosnian friends, and a majority of the Slavic Balkans, so Serbia, Croatia as well. And throughout the last, I would say, 2 years, I've developed more and more affinity towards Bosnia, not because I like the country, which it is, but because I've covered also Bosnian politics extensively. I've been involved a lot in covering the post-traumatic effects of the Bosnian genocide, which happened at the end of the Yugo Wars. So in terms of journalists, and I've gone there, I think, like now twice a year in the last few years. So I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of Bosnians. I understand the language, and I pretty much speak Serbian, so Bosnian is very easy for me to understand. And
Cool.
I think that's how it naturally developed.
Dope. So that kind of bleeds well into the next question, which is, how is this World Cup being anticipated by Bosnia and Herzegovina fans?
Honestly, I think compared to 2014, which is the last time that Bosnia qualified, it's even bigger. Because 2014, there were some sort of expectations, because you're talking about when Pjanic was still around, Dzeko when he was obviously a lot younger, because this is now 12 years ago. And this was the so-called golden generation in terms of the Bosnian perspective. And this year, it was not expected. Yes, Dzeko is still around for some reason. We have a few young talents, but nobody really expected Bosnia to actually go through. So I think it's really well anticipated because it's very emotional. It actually brings a country with a lot of ethnic tensions together, which is amazing to see, both on a football level, but also on a national level, which is very important, at least once in a year, to have something like that.
How's the football media responding to it? Is there still kind of a level of anticipation, or is there a little bit more of trepidation, pessimism, glass half empty?
I don't think there's pessimism. One of the reasons, and I'm going to have to go in a very local sense to explain this, there is a song by a band called Bioza, which was recorded ages ago, which is called USA, which talks about the typical Boston immigrant going to the US. And the main refrain goes like, "I just want to go to America, I'm Bosnian." And of course, this song was played right away after the qualification was confirmed. There was a hugest concert in Sarajevo, the capital. So I don't think there's a lot of pessimism. Parts of this has also to do with the group. I think it's a very affordable group because way worse was expected. If you look at how difficult Bosnia's trajectory was throughout the qualifiers, I would go on to say the qualifiers were much harder than the actual group will be. This isn't to say it's an easy group. It for sure isn't, especially with such a nation. But I don't think there's a lot of pessimism. I think most of the media approached it like the people did on a very emotional, personal perspective, saying, "Well, we did it." I think this is really what you can summarize it to.
What's your overall description then of Bosnian football culture for those who haven't been to the country? How would you describe how people enjoy football, consume football? What's it like?
It's very emotional. If you're looking for, beautiful technical football, don't go because you're not going to get that. But you have a lot of vibes, you have a lot of tensions. The said ethnic tensions I've mentioned are not rare, especially when it's a club from the Bosnian Serb part facing the more Croatian-leaning or the Bosniak parts. There tends to be a lot of ethnic insults. Many of them, in fact, regularly resurface as part of the wider politics. So you have a lot of that. It's very physical, I would say. I think if you've got an idea of what Serbian football is, if you look at Crvena Zvezda, which I think on a European audience and worldwide audience is a bit more known, or Croatia back in the World Cup, which 2018, I think this is what you can compare it with.
Cool. So I've been asking people to kind of play TV doctor for me and assess the state of the nation that we're discussing, football. What's your assessment overall of Bosnia and Herzegovina's football, both domestically and its ability to export players? Would you say it's in a healthy place or a not so healthy place at the moment?
No, I think, and it's a regular thing in the region, is there's a lot of missing infrastructure. We're dealing with a lot of fraud claims from most of the big clubs because of the refereeing system. I think, in fact, one of the reasons why this time they've managed to go to actually the World Cup is because they integrated better the diaspora, which traditionally in this region is a very big question, is do we still consider dual nationals as potential newcomers? And for the current coach, the answer was yes, because he himself had played in the Bundesliga. So if you look at the majority of the youth talents and the key players in this World Cup qualifiers, like you look at Baraktarevic, for example, he's originally and you might know this, in the US. Like he's been there quite a long time. And I think he's the reason why they're a bit different. And the fact that they've managed to integrate them is a sign. There's a lot of players right now which face the choice because they do, or even sometimes triple nationality, which is who to represent and how Bosnia, the federation, will be able to convince these potential stars to join them or rejoin them, I think is the differential between improvement or not.
So you kind of brushed or touched on the difficulty of qualifying relative to the World Cup group. So let's maybe jump into qualification. How easy or not easy was it? And obviously they were one of the last to qualify.
Very complicated. There was a lot of emotions. There was a lot of doubt. You're talking about Italy, for example, or even before, throughout their campaign. A majority of the media, including Bosnia, did not think that Bosnia could qualify. And ironically, I think that kind of propelled them because the Bosnians were aware that when Italy got to know that they get Bosnia, they actually were happy about that because of the level they underestimated that. And the coach was actually very smart in using this to his advantage and saying that we do have the potential and that essentially we have nothing to lose. Let's surprise them. I think this was really the mentality. So I definitely think that all the late goals we've seen throughout the different matches, very tense matches we're talking, where there was everything, I think this has built a sort of mental resilience, which is going to serve them onwards.
On a personal level, this will be what, 3 World Cups now without Italy? Is there
Yes.
on your personal level, do you feel like, man, I wish Italy would be at the World Cup? Or is it just like,
Nah,
hey, they lost, and it is what it is?
like, I mean, don't get me wrong, we all love Italy because, of course, they have, a great past. But it's just not what it is to be. And I'm sorry, like, the last time they couldn't be Northern Macedonia for the love of God. Like, you just don't deserve it. I think this is just the general mentality. It's not only me, I'm majority in the Balkans. We don't feel pity because if you did deserve to go there, then you'd be fucking there, and you're not. So I
Mm.
don't know, cry about it, do what you need to do, wipe your tears to your nonna, but improve yourself. Like you had 4,000 chances and you missed 4,001 chances. So the ball is on their court, I would say.
Mm. What's the federation done post qualification? So do you know who they're going to play in friendlies, where they're going to be based, all that kind of stuff?
Very good question. I did not look that far into it. I would lie if I would know that. I don't think there's been much because from my perspective and from my discussions I've had with different journalists, we still focus on the, oh my God, we're still in.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is still the feeling. And now, okay, some have started, to, rationalize everything and say, okay, right, we also want to, not just be there for the sake of qualification. I assume there are some friendlies, but I honestly have not time to check them. And if we're honest, also, there's not a lot of time left because we're already in May.
Oh,
So that's on my side.
so let's talk about the coach. Who's the coach, and what style of play should we expect at the World Cup?
What should you, he's honestly a very likable figure, very charismatic, very emotionally intelligent. He himself has personally mentioned he had played with several Bundesliga clubs. He is seen, I think, as someone who really brought the group together. He's someone who understood that if he played his cards on mixing the general resilient culture with the diaspora, which are younger. I mean, some of them are like 2007 or 2003, which is my own age. Um, I think this really defines him, is really someone who's just very sound. I don't think he's the most, CV impressive coach. He did play quite a few as a player himself, but I think the fact that he himself in his upbringing understands the importance of this beyond football, this sort of cultural element and this sort of mental resilience, I think is most important. You can definitely expect more a direct brand of football, a more creative, which is not because he himself is a very, attacking coach, but because of the players he fields. I think he's someone who works with the players and creates a product more than a predetermined idea of, what football should be played.
So it's 2026, and there's a lot of people just hanging on. Like we've got Messi, we've got Ronaldo, Modric. I, the Mexican goalkeeper Memo Ochoa is going to be at the World Cup. There's a lot of old dudes just hanging on. I'm going to add Edin Dzeko there. So it's 2026 and we're still doing Edin Dzeko. What form is he in, and what does he provide the team even at age 40?
I mean, of course, I'm not going to pretend like he physically is, young Ronaldo, because he obviously isn't. But I think it's going to sound very cliche, but just leadership. Because you have to understand that when you have people like Baraktarevic or, other younger talents, you do need a dude who's be like, okay, let's come down. This sort of experience, this sort of credibility. Also, Dzeko is just incredibly smart. I know it sounds, very cliche again, but it does. And I think that just as long as he's rightly managed, which I think so far has been done, he can prove to be efficient is when he's needed. And a lot of it has, of course, to do with his intelligence and experience, his leadership. So I think that's what he brings.
What other players, maybe lesser known players, or just players who I haven't mentioned yet, do you think are maybe in a good moment, a good window to perform well on the stage that the World Cup provides?
I think for me, I don't think he will play the most games, but Kerim Alabegovic, he has already shown a lot. And he is, I think, to some extent, even more flashy than already Baraktarevic is. Because I would compare him in terms of his spirit, not in terms of quality, but in terms of spirit, to Kvaratskhelia for PSG. I think he's that player who really can bring the flash, brings the excitement, where I believe that even neutrals who will be watching, the games, because of course, half of the world will not tune in for Bosnia, Canada. I mean, let's be honest. Besides the Boston diaspora, of course. But I think if you're neutral, he would be the type of player to really impress you from the first second, simply because of a very, I would say, risky way of playing football, but usually pays off. I think, for example, Tahirovic, he is less flashy, but he's the type of player that Boston needed after Pjanic left, because he provides this sort of stability, this sort of, okay, let's calm down, let's get things back to control, which usually Boston doesn't have at all. So, very needed.
Let's talk expectations then. Floor and ceiling for this group. In other words, how bad can it be and how good can it be?
It's difficult to say because the problem with Bosnia, and the good thing about it, is that a lot has to do with emotions. So this can be very good because it means mental resilience, but it can be also very 50-50 and can go the other way around as well. The good news is that the group is not that difficult. I think, okay, yes, Switzerland is definitely probably going to top the group because of the most experience, because they have proven European competitions that they're able to bring a very definite style. But then, for example, who the fuck knows Canada for football? Nobody. Like, these are a bunch of hockey players anyway. So, I mean, yes, okay, you've qualified, but like nobody thinks of Canada when they're playing football. Like, So I think Canada is very doable. And then I think the other one was Qatar, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
And okay, Qatar again. Okay, they've been decent, but also they're not world beaters. I think it's definitely doable. So I think the expectations, the goal should be round of 16. I think if they reach the round of 16, they qualify, it's already a success. But I would not say it's the end of the world if you fail to do that. Like, nobody's going to want you for that because half of the population is already happy anyway that they're there in the first place. That was like everything else is a bonus at this point. But of course, if we can avoid, 4-0, that would be amazing. And I think it's approachable. I think it's realistic. Yes, they don't have the squad depth of, other teams. I'm thinking especially Switzerland. But I think the second place is definitely within the reach.
Cool. Who's your pick to win the World Cup then, Kai?
For me, it's Spain. It might sound surprising, but for me, Spain already back at the Euros. Yes, I do have a bias because Spanish football is pretty much my field. But for me, they provide the perfect balance between those things. And they've proved time and time again for me that they're one of the most exciting. And the other, I'm going to sound cliche again, but for me, it's still France because of the quality. I don't think there's any World Cup where you cannot not say France because these bastards have 40 players who are amazing. Like, they have 2 teams worth of players, but, they get to field 11 players. So, they officially. Argentina, I don't think so. I've heard that shout a lot with both friends and people who are in the field. I don't see it happening, even if, Messi's there, whatever. I don't see that happening at all. But, who knows?
All right, last question. Is there anything that I haven't asked you already about Bosnia, Bosnian football culture, the national team that you find particularly fun or interesting that you think people should know or might want to know?
I've surely mentioned before, but I think anyone who's remotely interested in Bosnia needs to listen to the song USA by Dubioza Collective. You'll probably find clips online as well of when they celebrated that. And I think even if these clips, some of them are probably on shorts, on reels, on Instagram, there might be like, I don't know, 15 seconds. You understand the passion that is behind. I want to make it very clear that a lot has been offered for the games in Canada if Boston plays there because of the Boston diaspora. We're talking people inviting each other from across the fucking ocean because to see, Boston play. Um, so definitely that. And just I think they're really the peak dark horse ever. I'm not saying they're gonna go very deep, but they're the sort of team that are just there for the vibes.
Mm.
You're gonna get proper vibes with it. You're gonna get a lot of passion. So I think it's just that. Listen to the Visa Collective. They're a great music group. Not that I'm sponsored by them, but they're objectively amazing. And you should definitely listen to that song because it's great. And for once, it's actually in English, so our audience can actually understand them. And that's about it.
Cool. All right. Where can people find you again, Kai?
On Twitter, under the handle J Deposition. I mean, you can link it, I assume. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me. DMs, comments, you name it. My email is also in my bio in case there's any, more media-oriented people.
Cool. So
Yeah.
all the links will be in the description. Kai, I thank you for taking the time to do this, man.
Thanks for having me.